Hi everyone, I'm Jaya Vishwanathan, and you've found the No Brainer podcast where I discuss all things neuroscience in delightful conversations with various experts. I hope you enjoy today's episode.
So I think what you're saying, which I really am like loving absolutely, is that, you have to listen to your body from a non-judgmental space and like your body will get loud and your brain is
Mhm.
wired for you to take notice when these basic needs are not being met, right? And so that's both anatomically and behaviorally. And so your message is very valuable, and thanks for sharing that. I just want to get back to the gender differences. If you have
Mhm.
anything else to add about the gender differences piece specifically.
Yeah. So with testosterone has a 24-hour cycle.
Yeah.
And then women also have testosterone. So there's an interesting part there. What I found is that there are certain times when testosterone is lowered, and men can feel that. It is
Mm,
obvious. Their energy levels are low, they feel wiped, they're just not able to do the things that they want.
mm,
And it can be even more pronounced than women's cycles because we do have hormones changing every day of the month. Whereas, when men's
yeah.
testosterone is low, it's just like you can't ignore that. If you're in a certain luteal phase, things can feel fine, but then the menstrual might not. But like men are going to feel it.
Yeah.
And what is important to note is like, what does it mean to pay attention to your hormones as a man and to look at your environment and see, like, where am I? Sometimes working out too much can lower men's testosterone
I
levels.
see.
Sometimes getting sick and having the adrenals stop working in the way they need them. So there could be some autoimmune or viral things that can impact testosterone.
Mm,
What we find is that sometimes when digestion gets off because of some
mm,
inflammatory processes or food sensitivities, testosterone levels can change because of changing cortisol and inflammation and stress. So we find that when men are able to get into the cycles of really protecting their sleep, decreasing their stress with certain tools, and navigating the emotional aspects of life, because
yeah.
we do have a cultural difference in the way men and women process emotions. And sometimes they're similar, we all have uniqueness, but there's just usually different emotional processing patterns, not with every man, but with a lot of men. And sometimes those can impact our cortisol levels and our stress levels, and getting the
Mm,
right support to be able to process those emotions that are tucked away in the back. I worked with veterans, and sometimes they'll have panic attacks. They won't know what they're about or what they're from. And they can
yeah.
be from memories that were traumatic during war that were
Mm,
tucked away and actually not conscious, right? So they don't have any recollection of the memories because of the level of trauma, but they
yeah.
are there in their body. And so that kind of can be a disconnect and can feel really disorienting, to be
Yeah.
out of control of how your body's responding to the world. And so really working on bringing that connection into place and actually reestablishing a stabilization or
Mm,
regulation mechanism for what those experiences can help bring people back into control of their emotion and help them regulate them. Those can affect testosterone levels too, and especially when they affect sleep, because a lot of
yeah.
people will have nightmares or flashbacks, wake up in the middle of the night, and the fear center, the amygdala is on going hardcore, and they're back in the war experience. And
Yeah.
the sleep mechanisms aren't working to support their hormones. So testosterone can be shifted then. And that your identity, right, as like a strong, protective, capable, competent person gets like blasted. And so
Yeah.
really reestablishing that foundation is so valuable for men as they are moving through these kinds of things.
Right. Right. That's interesting because I also feel like some of the PTSD experiences differ between men and women anyway, because a lot of women, like men, tend to have more of these wartime, just statistically, I'm not saying, I'm sure when women sign up, they have the same kind of PTSD, but
Mm-hmm.
in general, women tend to have a lot of gender-based violence, or again, more statistically often than not. Doesn't mean the reverse doesn't happen. And so, do you see that, like, the cycles are getting disrupted in a similar way, or are these very dependent on the type of trauma?
I'm not sure. Just in my experience, I would say it's hard to say level of suffering, but for some reason, to me, it feels like the complexity of the menstrual cycle causes
Mhm.
like a lot of physical symptoms. And
Yeah.
because the male cycle isn't as complex, it can still cause a lot of symptoms, but they
Yeah.
are different. They're
Yeah.
they're not having cramping. They're, but they
Right.
can have mood swings, right? And they can
Yeah.
have the fatigue. And I think both of them, the impact on your quality of life is can be really significant. So
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
think
And the loss of sleep is, yeah,
yeah,
for
and then the loss of
PTSD is
work
well documented.
productivity
Yeah.
and feelings of competence. And that's where I see some of the depression come in when people feel hopeless about I don't even know what's going on. I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on. And I don't know why, am I broken? And it can be reassuring, to realize, okay, I'm not broken. My body's responding appropriately to certain
Yeah.
things. And this is how it feels. And that's actually appropriate. It should feel that. And so
Yeah.
I'm not abnormal. I just had things happen to me that are significant. And this is my body response. And there are appropriate ways to move through them too, to help people
Yeah.
feel better. But I always think of the body as doing the right thing, for what it needs.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really like that I hope if you're tuning in, you pay special attention to what Dr. McFadden just said, which is that you're not broken, your body's responding appropriately to a bad situation as it is wired to do, and that's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah.
That's priceless. Thank you for sharing that wisdom, that nugget of wisdom. So
Yeah.
speaking of depression,
Yeah. And I was
yeah,
just saying, usually, like, there's always a reason for things. So we might not know them, but we can kind of trust that the underlying things are there and that you're responding appropriately. Thank you. Thank you for
yeah,
telling me. It's important that
yeah,
I listen.
yeah, that's great. So speaking of depression, can you talk to us a little bit about what is the neuroscience of happiness and depression? Because I think for a long time, people were searching for the happiness hormone in the brain, at least neuroscientifically, and then it changed from being dopamine to serotonin to endorphins and all of that. But I think we've come a long way from that. And so, what is happening in the brain when we're feeling feelings of happiness versus when we're feeling feelings of depression?
Yeah. So I'm going to have you all kind of close your eyes and put your hand on your chest and just think
Okay.
of somebody that you love, maybe a person or a pet or something that you really have a lot of love for. Thinking about a really fun, joyful moment you had with that person. Be a loving moment. Just start to notice how your body changes. Notice your breath and your heart rate and your stomach and your back. Maybe your muscles, what they feel like as you think of this moment. And whenever you're done, kind of open your eyes and just start to reflect on that process. What the dance, in that moment, serotonin was released, dopamine was
Mhm.
released, oxytocin was released, endocannabinoids, so the natural marijuana of our minds. And also a lot changed in our heart rates and our blood
Mm.
pressure in those situations. Our muscles change. our neurons firing in our whole body can change. And so these physiologic changes, when we tap into the joy and the happiness and the love, are kind of like a whole organism experience. And so when we think about the parts of the brain, that can almost be like a cascade effect that has an impact on our whole bodies. And we also know that people who can feel this often, whenever they want or whenever they need, they have better health outcomes. They have less pain, they have less physical pain, presumably because of serotonin release in the spinal cord, but probably from a lot of different reasons, from the natural marijuana that gets released from that, and from the physiological changes, you know, the switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So the fight, flight, freeze into rest and digest. And that switch can be a huge switch that's essential in trauma treatments, you know, teaching people how to switch from that hypervigilant state of survival to that rest, I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
That can be really important to train your body how to do that. Sometimes we lose it. Sometimes in moments we don't have access to it. Sometimes in depression, we forget. And so we need to get reconnected to it. And then it can fire and light up those neurons and then cascade. Actually, Arthur Brooks teaches happiness at Harvard to business students, and he also has a course on Harvard X. And I helped him with the course, leading process groups for it. And he always taught that the happiness and unhappiness have different parts of the brain. So you can be happy and unhappy at the same time. They could be firing in the brain in the same time in different places, and you can feel that. And in psychiatry, that's called a mixed state. You know, if somebody's struggling with bipolar disorder or manic depression, the mixed state is I can feel so happy, but also unhappy, deeply unhappy at the same time. And it feels very strange, but it is something that can happen. And so that tells us something about what's happening in the brain and why are they there in different places, right? I think it really speaks to the fact that these are mechanisms that are used to help us with our behavior, and also mechanisms that reflect the complexity of life, that we could have good things happening and bad things happening at the same time. And we need to be attuned to both of those things, right? If we were so happy that we didn't pay attention to all the sad things, then we wouldn't be making adjustments to our life that actually allows us to be making change to have us be in a place that's happier. So we're really attuned, complex organisms that are nuanced in what we respond to. It's the full spectrum of, oh, this is neutral. Oh, needs some help. And oh, I want to celebrate this fun thing, and being able to feel all of them. I think there's a superpower here in really honoring the good things in life and taking space and time for them, and knowing that where you are now is actually a product of what you've done in the past. And so seeing that, where was I 2 years ago and where am I now? Look at that difference in terms of progress. And then if there's things that are struggling or difficult or a deep depression, what are the things that I need? What are my needs and how can I meet them? And sometimes in the depths of the unhappy being very strong, it can be challenging to even know, what is my body saying? What do I even need? What is my desire? What do I want? You know, sometimes that can be so strong, it can cut us off from the want. And that's when people start to think, well, I feel hopeless. I don't think I want to be here. I'd rather not, because there's this alleviation of that burden of life. And so that deep place can get really loud. And whenever I hear it, I also think, oh, my body's, you know, I've had those thoughts before, and I know my patients have, oh, my body's being very loud right now. It's saying, oh, I'm not getting my needs met. Oh, I have a need that either myself or somebody else isn't meeting. What is it? What is it that I actually want? What is it that I need to feel like I'm thriving? What am I missing? Like sometimes the wanting to leave, and some patients with suicidal thoughts, it's a coping mechanism to actually have agency in life. If this isn't okay, I can always leave. If this isn't the way I want it, I have an out. And it can be very empowering to think that you have that option, right?
Yeah.
So I always I always encourage people to say, okay, you have that option, and
Mm.
bringing that perspective and that view outward. What do you want? What is actually better for you in this situation?
Yeah.
And that can really help change that like internal anger to like
Yeah.
out. And there was a psychiatrist who used to say like suicidality and aggression turned inward is actually anger that's outward, but they don't feel like
Yeah.
it's safe. Like it's not safe to be angry at somebody because you can't control them. I can't
Yes.
control I can't control this person. They're going to do whatever the hell they want. So I'm going to like, I'm angry, but if I turn it on me, I can control me. And it's almost
Yeah.
like the ultimate self-responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
take this
Yeah.
on and I can be responsible for my life. And if I want to
Yeah.
leave it, I can. So there are
Yeah.
lots of layers to this and there are lots of nuances for everyone's experience. But these are just some patterns I've seen that can kind of account for some people. And so saying like, oh,
Yeah.
I have a need, I have a desire, I have an innate human need that's not getting met. It's not okay. Let me
Yeah.
figure out what that is and let me figure out how to ask for it because I deserve that. That's
Yeah.
something that has to be discovered and tuned into. And again, coming back to listening to the body, right? Your body's
Yeah.
giving you a message. We have to listen.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I mean it's such a tricky thing too sometimes because you're talking about control, right? And I think there's so little of life that we actually control, which
Mhm.
is itself such a source of frustration. We were talking about hormones, and even hormones in our own body is not something that we explicitly control. And
Mhm.
so, those feelings of frustration and lack of control are very real. But at the same time, it's also going back to what you said earlier, which I love, and I'm going to print it out and put it on my desk is it's the normal reaction of your body to frustration. It does not mean that you're broken or there's something wrong with you, which I
Mhm.
I think is just an incredibly powerful message. Switching a little bit more into your unique approach, can you talk a little bit about, you know, developing intimacy with your nervous system, which is something you talk about also on your website, which if you're tuning in, I'll be sure to put all the resources that you've talked about today as well as your website in the show notes so people can find more information about you and your research through those links anyway. And also, what are some of the things that you're excited about in terms of the research or advancements happening in this space of like being able to communicate with your body and your nervous system? Because that's quite a novel area of science.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think one thing I always teach people is like massage the vagus nerve. So like
Oh,
taking the hard
yeah,
part of
yeah.
your ear and pulling down or out. That can be really nice. And that's just one way to like develop this more deeper intimacy with your body. When you pull
Okay.
down there or you massage your neck here, your body will respond right away to that.
Mm,
And that's like I can affect my state whenever I want. Little kids do this naturally. They'll like pull on their ears, like they just
right.
know. Like, oh, this feels good.
Right.
Putting your hand on your chest here, right? These things are like really primitive things that
Mm,
we learn that can help us develop that intimacy with our body. And I really love somatic therapy, and I learned it after psychiatry residency. And I was like, what is this amazing thing? And there's still a lot of research on it right now. So it's coming out as kind of like the next wave for trauma.
mm,
But I found, and what somatic therapy is like it's really tuning into the body, right? There's so much we can know and so much emotion, but our body also has information too. So just using it as another layer of input where we can feel and understand, okay, I'm feeling tightness in my chest. I don't know what
yeah.
it's from or what it's about. Let me be curious about it. Let me be in the inquiry of what that is. And oftentimes, what happens is that people have this physical sensation, and then a
Yeah.
memory comes up, like it like just like pops up. Like, when was the last time I felt this? Oh, when I was 5. Oh my gosh. Or like 2 weeks ago, I had this.
Mm,
And the body kind of like has this way of telling you, hey, this thing happened before, and we are saying it's happening again. And so pay attention. And it can be this beautiful window into our history that we're not conscious of, but our body remembers and records in our nervous system.
Right.
And so we have this chance to go in and say, okay, what was I missing that I needed?
I see.
What did I need? Oh, it would have felt so good to have a hug and someone tell me, like, you're in just the right place. This is exactly where you should be. And you're doing everything right. You're doing it right for you. And to just hear that, right, and feel your body move and really absorb it and take it in and feel supported. And then to let your whole body feel that, right, and give that to yourself. Or imagine a parent or a friend giving it to you too. And we call that like, oh, that's like a reparenting technique, but it's a somatic inquiry technique where we really give our body what we need. We reparent ourselves in the moment that we needed it. We give ourselves that need that we were missing. And that can rewire the neuronal connections in our bodies. That'll, neurons will grow new spines, right? They'll make new connections. They'll fire in different ways. And that can actually record memory in our body. Like our body can say, oh, this is what safety is. I feel it now. Good. And it can remember that.
Yeah.
And so a situation that might have triggered a historical response, when we really go through this inquiry and give ourselves what we need and cause that rewiring, that can actually be the response later on, right? That healed response.
Right.
And that's really cool. And it's complex.
That is very
I
cool.
don't know which neurons are firing, and nor do I need to look at an image to figure it out. But you are telling me and you are feeling it, and then you're feeling the change. And that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
But if we were to scan you while it was happening, we'd see the whole systems that are at play and how they're changing and shifting, and the molecules that are involved and the organs that are blood flow is moving. And it would be really cool to watch it. But I just know it's happening. So I'm like, okay, we're rewiring. And I'll tell you one quick story. There was construction happening outside my apartment. And at one point it was so loud and I got so angry and I was like, ugh, I can't work and I have a headache and this is so annoying. And so I was like, ooh, I'm going to rewire. Let me do some somatic therapy. So I can cross your hands and like put them like this because it gets both sides of the hemisphere.
Okay.
Gets both sides of your hemisphere going.
Okay.
And then you put your left ankle under your right ankle, kind of getting that cross hemisphere action. And then I closed my eyes and I just thought of like as much of that emotion as I could, kind of like dove into it, like all the anger, all the annoyance, all this. And I just sat with it. I just sat with it, not trying to change it, really fully accepting it, right?
Yeah.
Like we mentioned, accepting the wisdom of this really valid response in my body, what's happening.
Yeah.
I sat with it. And then all of a sudden it started to change on its own. It started to shift. I got a little less. And then for the moment I was like, oh my gosh, like these people are doing this construction. I'm so grateful. They're rebuilding this building that got burnt down during a riot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that they're rebuilding. How nice that, and I just had this love for them, these people rebuilding. It's like, wow. And I went out and I played music for them and I said, thank you. And I just had this whole different relationship with the noise. And then the next day, the noise started again and I had a love response instead of the anger response, just innately, like it was like a reaction. And I didn't have the anger. I just had the love response. And I was like, I rewired. Heck yeah. And then I went out and I played music and then I ended up leaving because it was giving me a headache, but I wasn't angry about it. I was like, I can leave. And so that was really cool to see that shift in how I felt in that moment sustained throughout the next day and the day after that.
Wow.
So,
Thank you for sharing the really powerful technique. I'm definitely going to be trying that at home tonight.
Yeah.
So, and I encourage all of you listeners, and I think it's one of the best things we can do is to not carry forward hurt that doesn't serve us. Like, and I've had this other guest on who works on pain as well, and like acute pain, right? It serves an evolutionary purpose, and the evolutionary purpose is usually to teach us something, right? Like when you're a kid, if you go and like stand at the stove and put your hand on the fire, the acute pain will tell you don't do that again. That's not good for your body. But a lot of the time we carry forward memories that really don't serve us anymore, or experiences that like PTSD or anything else that we can change, that we've learned whatever we need to learn from, right? Like the learning is important, but then we still carry the pain of those memories forward into the future as if it was happening yesterday, as if it's happening
Mhm.
right now. So that becomes then chronic emotional pain, chronic physical pain. And there is no known benefit or for that. It's more like just things going wrong. And
Mhm.
so, if we have these wonderful techniques that you talked about, and I certainly encourage everyone to use it to let go of things that no longer serve you.
Right.
I think that's a path forward to being in the moment and being more joyful.
Hmm.
So, as we wind this conversation down, which I wish would never end, what advice would you give to people who are just starting out in their careers and who might be interested in doing patient work or neuroscience research similar to what you've been doing?
Yeah. I would encourage people to start off, I want to say start off small, but that's not what I mean. I started with the cells. I started
Mm,
simple. I was looking at a cell and I was looking at what's happening in the cell. And cells are not simple, by the way, but I loved being able to go from like a molecular experience and understand what's happening to then seeing how they all interact with each other, to then seeing
mm,
how it interacts in the body as a whole, and then also
right.
thinking how we operate in community and with each other globally. And so it was really, really powerful for me to walk through this from like the building blocks first of like the smallest thing and then build on top of it and then see how
Yeah.
they interact at higher levels and higher levels and higher levels, and then kind of operate at like a really high level to see as much as you can interacting,
Yeah.
because you know those little pieces. So when you learn the pieces and the players well, then you can see how they interact at like that grand level better because you know those
Yeah.
players and pieces. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of small nuances and things to learn all the time. But I just loved kind of going through my educational journey from that level. And yeah, that was just so fun to be able to do it that way. So if I don't know if you're interested in human behavior and communities and how people operate and live, at some point, if you get the chance to study a cell, and if you get the
Mm,
chance to study how two neurons interact or how two cells interact, and a chance to look at how they do that, I think those patterns will serve you for how you understand these bigger structures in our
mm.
system. And that doesn't mean like you have to go do a degree in it, but like to really take a
No.
moment and be like, oh, look at the DNA replicating. Look at this. How are proteins made in this cell? What are these building blocks of everything at this molecular
Yeah.
level? Look, how do the carbons interact? And looking at these beautiful, like talk about art, the types of structures that you get from these hydrogen carbons and the phosphorus and the
Yeah.
just gorgeous pieces that you get to see in nature over and over again at bigger and bigger levels. So,
Yeah.
well, that's what I'd recommend if you get the chance to be curious about that.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. And curiosity, I think that's another underlying message that you've been
Yes.
saying, which I also think is great advice for people.
Oh, and one more thing with that. One more thing with the curiosity. I think in the same way of like let's listen to our bodies and that signal, like
Hmm.
what is it telling us and how do we really honor that there's wisdom there, that we're not broken, that it's leading us. What
Yeah.
what is it like to be curious in the way where you're saying, oh, what lights me up? What am I interested in? Let me
Mm,
explore the things that I get excited about. Let me explore the things
right.
that follow my natural curiosity. And I think that's the intuition part that we aren't taught in school as much.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, let me just follow my guidance system. What is my own
Yeah.
internal guidance system and where does that lead me? Because I think a lot of times that's like a wisdom in our biology that we can sometimes shut down. And so when we follow our own sense of curiosity instead of somebody else saying, let's study this, that can
Yeah.
be really powerful for guiding in life.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Whitney. So what are some of your future projects that we can look forward to, or anything, last final thoughts to share with our listeners today?
So I have found one of the cutting edge pieces is that we have had so much genetic information, right? And we've had
Mm-hmm.
access to a lot of sequencing of our genome and learning from it, understanding epigenetics, so how we can affect our genome and how we can change
Yep.
our cells and our connectivity. So really that dance between what we inherit from our generations before us and then how we can alter it, right? So that's
Yep.
not like a death sentence.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and obviously there are exceptions to everything, but it's been really cool to see how to kind of give an epigenetic is just the altering of genes and their expression so that we can change ourselves to adapt to the environment.
Yep.
I love translating that into ways people change their health because people
Mm.
can change their health 180 degrees. I've seen people in the worst scenarios and they get out
Mm-hmm.
of them and they
Mm-hmm.
change and they have a different relationship with their body. They are able to feel amazing and they're able to
Mm.
lose weight and change their hormones and be in a better relationship with their bodies and their moods. And they're able to feel like they're themselves. I think that's one of the biggest things. Help people feel like they're healthy and they can be themselves. A
Mm.
lot of times people can feel disconnected from themselves when things aren't working the way they need to be working in health. So how
Yeah.
can we use this genetic information and this molecular information to really
Yeah.
help people be themselves? This gene is in our family, and this is why I'm really good at this thing.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no clue. And this is like passed down in my family. That's cool. Now I can like have a closer understanding of that. And oh, what do I do with that? Because it makes me really good at this thing, but not, I have challenges in this thing. So because of that, oh, I'm going to make sure that I do this. And when I do
Yeah.
that, my quality of life changes and I actually am like
Mm-hmm.
thriving. That's the key. And you're like really honoring yourself and your body and
Yeah.
thriving because of that. So that's kind of like the trickle down where the cutting edge, I think, is taking molecular and genetic information or the unknowns of our body and listening to them and
Yeah.
really having people transform their lives. Because when I see people just like, no more fatty liver, no more diabetes, no more depression, no more anxiety, their metabolic health is in place. They know how to do it, change their diet, change their lifestyle. These are big words for things that are many steps, many different cultural group support network. Like do it in community. Don't try to
Yeah.
changing your health alone is like a really challenging thing, but changing your health in community is like a lot easier. And so I
Yeah.
really am excited for that part of this, which is bringing in the community aspect and bringing in the change, like helping people feel more like themselves in community.
Right. Wow, Whitney, thank you so much. I feel so much fuller emotionally at the end of our call, and I'm sure our listeners do too. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your techniques towards better health and what you're excited about in your research. I really can't. I feel a little bit lost for words, which is new for me, at how much I feel enriched after our talk. And so I really can't thank you enough for making the time. And I hope to have you again in the future and to talk about more advances in science and dances and art and so many
Yes.
more topics. So thank you. Thank you.
Jaya, I'm so blessed to be here and I'm really receiving all of your beautiful words. So I'm so grateful for you and hosting this podcast and sharing it with everyone.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed this episode of the No Brainer podcast and see you at the next one.
Discover the magical world of senses with Baby Senses, a sensory neuroscience primer for all ages. Journey through the wonder of sensory systems, from traditional human senses to extraordinary animal abilities, in this wonderful award-winning children's book by Dr. Jaya Vishwanathan. It brings to life a world hidden from the naked eye by blending neuroart with neuroscience to reveal nature's complexities and marvels. Baby Senses is an enchanting exploration of how we perceive our world. With a helpful glossary at the end, this book is perfect for young minds and curious adults. Dive into this beautifully illustrated masterpiece and awaken your senses to the beauty and diversity of life.